that. There's all these like trains, and actually getting a train takes days and days of work because there's so many parts that go into it, and it's like massively complex. But when you finally get it, you're like, yes, I'm the proud owner of this train. Yeah, and other things that I thought were really interesting, the social influence thing, like I said, is the kind of place where like Facebook and Twitter are all playing up over here in the social prodding and the mentorship and the thank you economy and the like social invite friending kind of world. And then in meaning, there's actually a lot of games that play this in a kind of a false way, where like you're the one person in the world who can save the world, and it has to be you, and so there's this manifest destiny story, right? And it's a little overplayed in a lot of games, but you can see why they do it, because if it was true, wow, geez, that's sure motivating. So anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I recommend, he actually has a website where you can go and you can actually, for any thing in your life, you can actually fill out the level and it will adjust the shape of this octagon so you can see where your game is dominant and stuff like that, which is really cool.
Just sort of one question, which is, like a lot of these things seem to be correlated with sort of positive motivation. I was wondering that we can maybe just talk later about avoidance, because that's the one which is not very
yeah, so actually I wrote, his thing doesn't actually have white hat, black hat, intrinsic and extrinsic. He talks about that in the book, but basically the top is like the healthy, good motivations, and the bottom is like the evil ways to motivate people. And so that's like the avoidance, right? So sunk cost tragedy, fear of missing out, all of these things which are kind of like punishments if you don't do it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And there are lots of games that do that kind of thing.
I see.
You might enjoy sprinkling in some of the life gamification examples. So, for example, Stick for avoidance, and Habit RPG for social influence, and virtual goods.
Yeah.
So that'd be.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea actually. I mean, he gives lots of examples like that in the book too, where it's just like, here's the thing where it's, yeah. Yeah, so, and then the other thing he talked about is this intrinsic, extrinsic. So extrinsic is like receiving some kind of reward that's external to yourself. So whether it's a new virtual object in your game, or whether, in the real world it's actually, things arrive or whatever. And then intrinsic is like rewards inside your own head, so that a lot of the social stuff is over there. But also things like Easter eggs in a game, right? It's not a thing you can keep. In fact, it's kind of ephemeral. You may never be able to get it again, but like it is a reward, and it is kind of an intrinsic pleasure of knowing like I found this thing, which is really cool.
And it's also something where, just, first of all, great slide, gives me so many ideas, and just like...
Oh yeah. So this slide, in all honesty, you can go online. Yukai Chao actually has like TED Talks where he basically spends his whole talk on basically this slide. All he does is like pull it apart some more, which obviously you could do for hours.
Right.
In fact, there's a 300-page book if you want to go read it. It's called Actionable Gamification.
Yeah, that we saw.
Yeah. So I don't have time here to go into any level of depth on it, but it is really cool, and it's inspired a lot of ideas that I will be implementing in my system in some way or other in the coming months. But really, the book, he talks at length in the introduction and in other places about the fact that really what gamification is about is optimizing systems around humans and human motivation instead of optimizing them around whatever the system is nominally about. So like the efficiency of the system or the productivity of the system or whatever. So it's all about humans. And that is really interesting when you think of it in terms of the workplace, or even in terms of your personal life, where maybe instead of being a slave driver and trying to drive yourself with extrinsic rewards or whatever, what you actually need to be thinking of is like figuring out what actually motivates me, and how do I tie those motives and motivations to my goals in some kind of a concrete way, right? And obviously that's going to vary from person to person, but if you can succeed in figuring out what your motivations are and figuring out how to tie those to what your goals are, you could theoretically go from a world where you're whipping yourself to a world instead where it's just easy to do the things that you're supposed to be doing because you're going to get the great rewards that you want. And that's the promise of gamification, is this world where you're having a lot more fun, everything is a lot more pleasant, because the system is set up around you.
And I think that's sort of an important point of thinking things. I would break it down into sort of 3 steps, right? Of your motivation as a fuel. If you're not motivated, you're not just moving, right? And if it's thinking of it as a machine, you need to put some gas in it. And you also need to know what is the most optimal way to get someplace. You need to figure that out. And then you need to say, okay, given that these are 3-4 possible pretty good ways, and this is how I put gas in my machine car, now which one do I actually take, and how to actually marry the two and really go on. But I think otherwise you run the risk of missing out on one or the other, right? If
so there's a whole piece that isn't in this talk, which is like, how do I figure out what my goals are? That's way beyond the scope of this talk. But I agree it's important, and it's not easy. In fact, that's probably the hardest part about living an awesome life, is like figuring out what awesome means.
Actually, one of the concepts from Steve Camp's book, the imagine the level 50 character.
Of yourself, yes.
Yeah. It's helpful for kind of making that concrete visualization.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, in the same way that thinking about what your epigraph should be at the end of your life, right? Like, you want people to be upset about you.
But so when you're thinking of level 50, do you also place some time on that, or is this like?
No, just like you just imagine, like the most epic, awesome version of your future self. What is that person like?
Yeah.
What is that person doing? What is in their life?
And just painting that picture.
And you paint that picture, and then once you have that picture, then you can try to like kind of backtrack and be like, well, if that was true at 50, then at 40 it must have been this, and at 30 it must have been that, and so on, back to like 2 where you are now.
It's not necessarily chronological. It's kind of like the way that you would log into an MMORPG. You see these people who are like totally awesome.
And like
And
some
that's
mesmerized by that, exactly.
Yeah.
I think this is also like really effective. I've done that in my sort of team, but I think like just in the team as well, when you say, okay guys, brainstorming time, and we're thinking of the place that we'll be happiest when we're working, right, or something that's within that context, but just getting you to be able to express what that awesome version is, and periodically being able to update it at some point, with a few years or something like that, take a look at it again and see, because you may have learned new things about yourself. And that epic version, level 50, has changed perhaps, or evolved.
So that's one thing Steve Camp says over and over in his book is like, my quest changes all the time, but like, it's still important, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, this is getting close to the end of my talk, and I just want to talk about actually leveling up and the idea of a boss battle and like experience points. And one of the things that I learned in Steve Camp's book is basically this idea of rewarding yourself when you complete really significant events in your life. And it fits into other pieces of my personal development I'm doing really recently, but it is super important. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking about what my level up rewards are. Right? Like when you level up in a game, often it's because you defeated some big boss and there was an epic loot drop and you now have like a new suit of armor or a better sword or some kind of magic spell or whatever it is. And then you also get a bunch of like a massive pile of gold. And so I was like trying to figure out analogies for that. And Steve Camp actually had this really, really insightful point that was just profound for me to read, where he said basically like the rewards that you give yourself should not counter the goals that you have in your life. So like for instance, if you have, his is a fitness site, right? So he's like, a lot of people have this goal where they're gonna run more, right? And then when they run more, they reward themselves by giving themselves ice cream. And he's like, it's counterproductive. You're running probably because you want to lose weight and be in better fitness, and then you reward yourself by giving yourself.
You're leveling down.
You're leveling down. So every time you level up, you're leveling down. And he's like, if that's the way you're going to run your life, you're not going to get very far. So instead, he says what you should do is figure out rewards for yourself that will be genuinely awesome and will help you get closer to more boss battles and more leveling up. So the example that he gave for runners is, you start at a low level, you're not running very far, your gear is kind of crappy. When you get to your milestone, whether maybe it's your first 5K or whatever, what you reward yourself with is a new running outfit and awesome new running shoes. And now you've got better gear, you're feeling better about yourself, and it's easier to achieve your 10K goal, right? And so I've been thinking in my life about how to basically reward myself in ways that support my goals instead of counter my goals. And it's not easy, of course, but I have several ideas. One of them is this idea that I got a kick for a Kickstarter fund. I love new technology and fun things, and I love learning about things and interacting in new communities and stuff. And so my idea now is basically I already kind of spend money on Kickstarter, and I'm just going to zero that out, and instead, I'm only going to be allowed to spend money on Kickstarter when I complete epic boss battles and level up. And I think that will work relatively well. And then I also usually have a list of like things that I want in my life, many of which are like things for the Hack Lab kitchen. Actually, I recently got the immersion blender, so this slide is now out of date. But that's the idea. It's like basically like new gear. In the same way that you get in video games, right? You get brand new gear when you level up. And I want to figure out what the new gear could be in my life that I could reward myself with. What else did I say? Oh yeah, open new territory. This is another thing that happens in a lot of these like games. Is like as you progress, you have to pay usually enormous amounts of in-game silver or whatever the cheap currency is in order to open new territory. And the new territory has like new quests, new abilities, new places to put all of your factories and stuff. And so in my life, the equivalent of opening new territory is like having gigantic new, really cool projects to do. And I have this new one that's been kind of sitting on the back burner for a while called the Venus Society. So I decided when I actually finish the next major thing, which is Maker Festival, that I will actually properly get started on my new territory, which is the Venus Society, which should be heaps of fun. And then the other thing that happens in games too is upgraded skills, attributes, and titles. So you become a more awesome version of yourself in some way. And I totally want to have skill trees for myself and title trees for myself and all that kind of stuff. I just need to work out exactly what it is. But I certainly feel like if I accomplish my 1,000 questions, one of the things that happens is charisma +1, right? I'll just be better at interacting with people.
Like, is it important, or how important is it to have a symbol for it, to have something concrete in exchange for it, like in terms from motivation standpoint?
So that's like the charisma +1. Obviously, that's some kind of intrinsic reward, right? And I think probably new territory is relatively intrinsic. And then the new gear is obviously an extrinsic reward.
The new territory, it's something like it's still somewhat abstract, but at least it's still something that you've seen that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And you can say that I've done. Whereas, how do you not forget that you've got charisma +1? Like I think.
Oh yeah. So that one is super abstract. I agree.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I don't even have a character sheet for myself where I could add a charisma +1.
Exactly.
Right?
I think
But I could theoretically make such a thing.
Right.
In fact, that would be probably a really fun day.
And maybe pick it up with after my boss battle. That's what I do. I create a.
Yeah. Why not? So this is the end of the talk, and I'm just going to encourage you all to go out and gamify your own life. I don't know whether you want to collect coins like Super Mario or whatever, but in general, I've been having heaps of fun, and I feel like even though I'm already a couple of years into this, there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit for me in terms of figuring out how to better motivate myself, how to better reward myself, and how to have more fun and a more awesome life. So go out there and get some. Also, this is kind of like the addendum to my talk. You don't have to do it alone. There's like hordes of companies that are starting up in order to help you gamify your life. This is just 4 examples I found in 10 minutes of Googling. There's one, Chore Wars, that helps you do like kitchen chores at home. Basically, you and all your housemates sign up and you're an RPG gang. And every time you complete a task, you get experience points. And it allows you to like swing the sword to help defeat the current monster. Really cool. Mind Bloom is this like plant that grows on the website, and every time you accomplish more of your goals, the plant gets more cool and it starts to blossom and stuff. Motivate yourself to do anything. Habitica is this like really elaborate system for allowing you to entrench your habits using gamifying elements, including RPG things and like loot drops and stuff. And Live Gamefully is kind of like the serious one of the bunch, where like it's actually all enterprisey, so it's less interesting to me, but if that's your thing. Anyway, my point is, you can find tons of this kind of stuff out there, and there's hordes of people blogging about it, and people like Steve Camp writing books, so you don't have to figure it out alone. Like, I'm sort of going along because I always love reinventing systems, because systems are kind of the thing that I love the most. but there's lots of ways to do it without, reinventing the wheel. And that's my talk. Thank you all. These are all of the things that I do. You can look me up.
I've got, by the way, excellent talk. I think really cool stuff in there, and I think the other good stuff, just from like the objective perspective of talk and stuff, is you've got enough hooks that the fact that you don't know what your audience is and things like that, that you can actually hedge for it. So yeah, both relevant and also you've got few directions here that you could play by ear and sort of expand on things, which is really great and awesome. One question which I had was, you've been doing this now for a couple of years. What have been some of the things which you thought would work and ended up being that doesn't really work all that well, or things that you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be, just things which didn't end up working.
Well, so like I said, the original Epic Quest of Awesome, when I started, I thought that it would be relatively motivating by itself.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I discovered that it's kind of backwards looking and not sufficient by itself. Like I would just forget about it for months on end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why this year I have this personal dashboard project where I'm trying to like bring the goals much more prominently into my consciousness and closer to my day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was definitely one of the big things I learned. And as it turns out, if I'd been paying more attention to Steve Ham, he was, at the same time we discovered his like Epic Quest of Awesome, he was already implementing the whole like goal system on his website, and you could see, but was I paying attention? No, I wasn't.
Right.
What else have I discovered? I knew even before I started this Epic dashboard that the hard problem would be actually updating it and paying attention. And it does help to have it so prominent in my room, definitely, but it may not be enough in the end. We'll see, I don't know. It's still lasting, it's been like 4 months now, and I'm still updating it on a semi-regular basis, which is good. But I know from playing video games that like my video game attention span is about 60 days. So in real life, maybe my attention span will only be like, double or triple that. We'll see, I don't know. But I am very worried about that kind of problem and maintaining focus on it over the long term. We'll see.
When you're talking about your progress, sometimes it's like you're meshing against like 1,000 questions, and it's a little discouraging sometimes when you fall below the slope of your expected trajectory. One of the things that I find works very well for me is have that kind of bronze, silver, and gold thing, so that you're celebrating at smaller milestones.
So I considered also having like monthly milestones for these kinds of things. So like it would be like 100-ish questions a month or something, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's a good idea.
But if you tie it back to that lovely chart, then you can start thinking of different achievements that spice up. So it's not just a numeric progression towards a goal. You can look for your combo where you're asking 5 questions about the same thing to dig deeper. And I find with my life, especially with all the things we didn't know were things until they happened, having that kind of achievement unlocked, come up with a clever name for it, and package it nicely and put that in your journal thing works very well for me as a gamification element.
Yeah, that's good idea.
So the other sort of thing here is I am probably not one of the target audience, and I say that from I am really bad with games. Like I used to play games when I was young, when 14, 15, and something happened in my brain at some point, and I think even then I sort of lost it. What happened was when I'm playing a game, I'd get started, and I remember when I was in grad school, my friends were like, oh, we should play this, and they introduced me to Limbo, introduced me to Braid. I enjoyed Braid because I actually just spent a few days and just got it done with, and at that time I wasn't doing anything, right? But even with Limbo, I didn't actually make it all the way to the end, not because I didn't love it, but because every time that I would spend there, my mind would be thinking, what am I really getting out of this, right? And I'm really bad at it in terms of things which attract other people towards games. Really, they don't work for me. I didn't spend any time ever at Farmville, and none of these things, right? For me, games are sort of a different experience. So as I went through your talk and things like this, there were certain things definitely which sprung at me which would still cross apply, right? Just looking at a dashboard, looking at something like that, that's useful, right? And that goes across the board. There are certain motivational things which are not just restricted to the fact that, oh, you're geeky or you love games and this would just be an extra thing. Boss battles, even though I'm not a game person, this is really awesome because it makes it an awesome thing. You've done this, right? But I also see certain challenges, right? Some of the things that you mentioned of resources that people have, or how to make chores and things like that. it does nothing to me, and I'm really terrible at it with my like girlfriend and stuff, and like forgetting about chores, and there's been some one of the things like, yes, I need to get that, and try. But these are the things where it's almost like it's difficult to make progress on, because motivation things of a character has bloomed, or a plant is growing and things like that just don't work enough. But I think there's certain complementary things which I didn't have those ideas before, but I do now after hearing you speak, which may work. As an example, if you like using the social aspects of that, right? So similar to a dashboard, but looking at it and reviewing it together when it comes to chores stuff, that by itself may be enough.
Yeah, create yourself some social
Exactly.
accountability or something.
Right, and I think I think stressing on some of the human elements, stressing on some of the things which do work, which may not, which certain other proxy systems may take away from. Like for me, I know the interaction side would benefit, and if I were to use like a dashboard, virtual dashboard, which have that, I'm doing this activity, and so my character has gone bigger. I can now go on a quest, or I can swing a sword. That won't work, right? So I think there's a lot of things.
It's totally vary per person. I can agree
Right.
completely, and that was the reason that I had to put that slide in, like. Because the map is just so huge, there's got to be stuff here that work for you. He actually makes this audacious claim in the book, which I don't frankly believe, that all human motivation is here, with the exception of what he calls the 9th hidden motivation, which is sensual. So basically any of the things, the sensual elements in your life that motivate you, whether it's like the, just touching something or sex or whatever it is, that's not here, but every other motivation that humans have is present here. That's his claim.
Well, sensual is defined by things which are not here, right?
Well, what he means is like it's a motivation you are acquiring because of your senses and the way that your senses are intrinsically rewarding. So like even taking a piss can be pleasurable, right?
Right.
That's what he means by sensual. And so basically sensual as opposed to like it's something that is occurring in your brain in a largest scope.
So to touch on your point, the meta message of this talk is figure out your quest of awesome and also your mechanisms for motivating that quest of
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. Exactly.
Then one of the things you can do with this chart is you can talk about how the different approaches you tried. Like you started off with your progress bar, and then what worked and didn't work for you, and then you might also give some ideas for how people who respond to different things might do it differently. So that way you get to, you might even use like highlights in Keynote for this or whatever. You get to show that kind of thinking about the mechanisms.
And you also get to choose like your white hat, black hat strategy, right? So I actually feel like there's a lot of people who are going to make progress by threatening themselves down here, right? Like if I don't do this thing, I'm not going to allow myself to go to this thing, so I'm going to have this fear of missing out.
But I think that's also like for your actual talk, something like if I were giving this and so like take it with that opinion, one of the things that I might do would be make sort of a few broken down versions of this, because I think this is so. There are two things about this slide which make it somewhat annoying, right? One is there's so much good stuff in there.
So much stuff here, yes.
But so this is amazing. The thing which makes it somewhat annoying is this is entrenched in the enterprise stuff, right? And what they do is they throw labels because everybody loves labels and enterprises love labels. The first thing you notice is this silly octagon right in the middle, right? He also came up with the name Octalysis, right? Which because the enterprises love that shit.
Enterprise love that shit.
Exactly. And so, but that detracts from the amazing content which is in there, right? And I think breaking that down and perhaps even like in the beginning part, if you poll your audience and say, well, how many of you actually do play RPGs? How many of you actually don't? May give you a bit of leeway if you have a few broken down slides here. Okay, I wasn't going to talk about this, but let's talk here because there's content here and things that people can do even if this doesn't work. Or there's extra content which will work better if you love these kind of games, depending on your audience, right?
And actually, like depending on how your audience goes and whether you have time, polling your audience also on just the 4 categories is a bit much, but giving some everyday examples of what people might do and then asking how many people resonate with that might be interesting. You might say, okay, how many of you have ever bet somebody Like you're going to do something, you're going to pay them if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, which would certainly be down here.
Exactly.
It's actually listed, but it's got to be.
But I think that's extremely important because what enterprise things do is they obfuscate by names, right? It's evanescence, opportunity. Well, okay, if you think about it, you know what it means, but when you see
Right.
it doesn't really connect.
So
Yeah.
translating it
Exactly.
into those everyday things
Yeah.
helps people think, oh, this I can use this to help myself design my own quest of awesome using methods that works for
Yeah.
me.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so this is basically like a long list of tools and strategies you can apply. I mean, the reason I didn't make more slides is once you start down that pathway, I feel like you're
No, I think
Inside. This is more of the excuses to go wake up your audience.
Yeah.
In
Right.
case.
But I think also more of if you care, and I'm guessing you do care about what the audience takes away from it. Adding those kind of tidbits would give them motivation to check this out more. Otherwise, I feel a lot may just be like, okay, there was stuff there. Because see, let's just looking at it now. Easter eggs, excellent thing to do with my partner, right? Because I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know. She doesn't know what I'm thinking. But amazing, right? We can do this and play games and stuff. And not only is it a thing
Yeah, I
which
feel like
shackles
actually
the-
unpredictability is often a great strategy in relationships.
Exactly. Within bounds.
Our relationships and Reddit is full of all these, oh, I was doing a prank again.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
But
And
yeah,
also, I mean, sudden rewards is another
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
so I guess like if you can give people the feeling at the end of the talk that it's that, not so much that oh Eric is so cool, but oh I'm going to be so cool once I do this, then that's what you wanted to walk away with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree completely. The whole point is to inspire them
Yeah,
to
yeah,
somehow gamify their own lives.
And
in
if
some
they
way.
can recognize themselves in it,
Yeah.
that will help them with that.
And I think sort of like what you may want to just do is like this slide is amazing, but like I think having the second version of this slide with just very few things, right? Pick one of the easier ones of these things which are highlighted. Everything else is sort of slow.
Yeah.
Easter eggs is highlighted. Another one
Bring
thing
all that
more
and pick
extensive.
four of these and talk
Exactly,
about
and
them.
just
Yeah.
just have a brief thing, and depending on the time you may want to do that, but I think this would be a really good thing to talk about because this connects a lot of the stuff and also makes it real, right? A lot of things are amazing in the abstract in the sense of, pick a goal which is, pick a reward which is not contrary to your goal. Well, what if that's the empty set? It's somewhat of a hard thing to do, right? But of course it's sufficient to have something which is even orthogonal. But giving an example of that, and I'm glad that you did when you were talking about it, getting new running gear and things like that, like, oh okay, that's not really all that hard. Or connecting it with things that I was already going to do, right? Things like that. But I think just those examples is stuff which really helps make it real.
Should be fun. You can always type back to, okay, these are the specific things that work for me.
Exactly.
This is how it translates into my life.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
wow.
can easily pick 4 of these and tell a story about each. It wouldn't even be hard. Actually, I have a really good one for Easter eggs already.
Nice.
So I just pick a few more. And what I don't want to pick, because most of the talk is already PBL.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm not going to pick
Exactly.
accomplishment. Like, that's already well covered. I just want to pick others. for
Yeah,
other
the not so
categories.
obvious ones, right? Or perhaps the ones that you know about but people don't often do, right?
Yeah.
I think people often do Easter eggs when they should, and when you think about it, you're like, duh, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
duh. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a thought earlier about the boss fights that you resonated with, right? And you mentioned also, one of the interesting things about boss fights is that you're expected to mess up.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
And you
You're
can try
supposed to
again,
fail the
and
first, like,
you
37 times.
can try again, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So if a lot of people are going into this are afraid of failure, both at the tracking and at the thing itself, and thus tracking the failure seems so discouraging, then playing that aspect of it, talking about how gamification gives us that permission to fail and keep trying and keep improving, might be an interesting way to address that concern.
Yeah.
And there's like a double effect here, right? One is tracking makes you more conscious of a failure, and so you want to counter that. But more importantly, when you're going through some deadlines and things like that, even if you're not tracking, it drains away from your motivation to see that you fail. But if you put it in that perspective of, well, yes, of course I'm not going to succeed the first time. It's a boss fight, duh, right? It's like I need to build up, prepare, and attack this beast.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is why Wendy actually her company does these, they're called internal deadlines. They have like a client deadline
Yeah,
here,
Yeah.
and then they have an
And
internal
dry
deadline 2 weeks,
deadlines.
maybe even a month before, where actually they don't know often that it's an internal deadline.
And that's the way it works best,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is because you know you're gonna fail that boss fight the first time. Good. Yeah.
Fun. Very fun.
Really good talk.
Yep,
What
let
do
me
you want to
go.
learn from your audience when you're doing this? If you want to, if you want to structure it so that let's say people talk to you afterwards in the conversations, what kinds of things do you want to learn from them?
Yeah, so I would love to hear about anybody else who's doing, like, gamifying their lives. That would be just fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. In fact, we should totally convene like a QS
Gamification.
gamifying. Yeah, although I don't know, judging by attendance today, maybe there's not that much interest in QS, I don't know.
No,
Well, the
I
next
think-
one,
I
the
think-
next one is you